Delivering a common future, connecting, innovating and transforming. That's the theme for today's observance of Commonwealth Day 2023. This is your favorite television program, Jamaica Magazine. I'm Adrian Atkinson. Coming up, we look at how you can obtain a land title and the process our drinking water goes through to be safe for consumption. Then later, we see women going against the tide. These and so much more await you. But first, the news.
Good day, I'm Stephen McHugh, and this is your JIS News for Monday, March 13, 2023. The island's doctors and teachers have accepted the government's offer under the Public Sector Compensation Review. At the weekend, delegates from the Jamaica Teachers Association, JTA, and the Jamaica Medical Doctors Association, JMDA, voted to accept the compensation package. Of the nearly 800 teacher delegates who voted, 629 opted to accept. 147 voted to reject the offer. 8 delegates abstained. Meanwhile, about 95% of doctors voted to accept the new wage package. Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark announced recently that approximately $12 billion had been allocated for teachers and $6 billion for junior doctors. Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie is gravely concerned about what he describes as the high number of bushfires caused by human activity across the country. The Jamaica Fire Brigade has recorded 1,968 bushfires over the first 67 days of this year. The figure is more than half the total bushfires for 2022.
What I can say to the country is that 99% of these bushfires are caused by human error. Either burning of garbage or trying to clear field, farmers burning out lands, and persons smoking and throwing away the butt that have created major concern.
Minister McKenzie was speaking at a press briefing last week on measures to tackle bushfire. He lamented that recent days have been catastrophic for the corporate area with the number of bushfires reported. Minister McKenzie says over 1,000 buckets of water were pulled from the Mona Reservoir to put out the infernos using a JDF helicopter. Commissioner of the Jamaica Fire Brigade, Stuart Beckford, supports the minister's appeal for personal responsibility.
It is only through the combined efforts of Jamaica Fire Brigade and our citizens in their personal capacity, as well as in their roles as community members, that bushfires and every other category of fires will become rare rather than regularly as they are.
Meanwhile, fines under the Country Fires Act will be revised as part of measures to stem the increase in bushfires caused by human activity.
There is a Fire Act that speaks to it is an offense under, it's a criminal offense. But as usual, the fines is about, I think, $2,000, and we'll be looking now to have those fines revisited. But there is under the law the Fire Act, which make it illegal for you to do such thing.
Under the Country Fires Act, persons who intend to set fire to trash on any land must give 7 days' notice to the officer or sub-officer in charge of the nearest police station. Notice must also be given to occupants of all adjoining properties within a half-mile radius. Persons are also required to clear an open space of at least 15 feet in width around the material to be burnt and remove all inflammable material. Additionally, persons who leave fires unattended before they are fully extinguished will be deemed guilty of a breach. A stern warning has been issued that water distributed by the government is not for sale and should be used for the intended purposes. Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie says concerns have been raised by residents in various communities that they're being charged for the precious commodity.
I want to make it clear that the funds provided by the government for the chucking of water, the water that the government is providing must be provided to the consumers free of cost. There is no charge associated with the chucking of water.
The minister is also stressing that the water provided is only for domestic use. He says car wash facilities will be monitored by the National Water Commission and his ministry to ensure that water used by these entities and citizens to wash vehicles are not what the government is providing to communities. The minister wants individuals to report illegal activities to the relevant authorities.
And persons who are experiencing those problems are asked to call the ministry or call your municipal corporations or to take down the license number of the truck and send it here, because we are not going to allow persons to exploit the problems that people are facing by doing something which is illegal.
And finally, Albion Primary School in Knockpatrick, Manchester, has received a new classroom block to house its special education unit. The structure was built over 17 months at a cost of $87 million. It was financed by the Caribbean Development Bank through the Basic Needs Trust Fund. During the handover on Friday, Education Minister Fable Williams said the 754 students and 56 staff members would benefit from the new block.
We're happy that Jamaicans have embraced the inclusive education. No longer are children with special needs separated from mainstream. They're there. And what that means is, as those children grow into becoming adults, seeing special needs person around will not be strange to them.
The project was managed by the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, JSIF.
The project also is supported with laptop computers, a 75-inch digital screen, books, learning aids, and if you want to say the teachers and the other persons who participate in what happens here also went through a 4-day residential workshop in ensuring that the maintenance and management of this facility can be sustained.
And that's it for JIS News Today. I'm Stephen McHugh. Thanks for watching.
Yes, walk right over there and drop it in the bin. Reuse that wastewater from your kitchen for the garden. Get your hands dirty and plant a tree. Farmers, hold off on the pesticides, especially near our rivers. Do your part to protect our watersheds so we can preserve the source of our drinking water. Every act to protect our watersheds counts. Start now.
Watch now as the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark, shared the budget presentation for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Our country, with our history, needs trained counselors and social workers who can help heal the nation's wounds. However, Madam Speaker, the remuneration for social workers in the public sector was artificially depressed, as compensation for groups that were generally in the same pay packet received adjustments which moved away from social workers as a group. And this is repeated throughout the public sector. This resulted in compensation for that group that is inconsistent with our state of affairs and not reflective of the work done by social workers. So, Madam Speaker, the compensation review and restructuring allowed us to make adjustments to the pay structure for social workers that could not be achieved in the usual one-size-fits-all lockstep approach. Madam Speaker, the Jamaican bureaucracy needs to be able to attract and retain managerial and technical talent. We need the best IT technicians and computer scientists and communication specialists, network engineers, legal draftspersons, civil engineers, data scientists, lawyers, accountants, prosecutors, economists, managers, HR officers to deliver premium public service. Madam Speaker, we have vacancies in the economics unit of the Ministry of Finance, which we have not been able to fill for years. The same is true of the Attorney General's chambers and in technical areas where turnover on account of salary has been at epidemic proportions, Madam Speaker. This has been a crisis, and the system is breaking because we don't have sufficient talent for long enough periods in all the areas that we need. And we're unable to attract the talent because of the low compensation levels. So we needed to make adjustments to compensation in many of these technical and managerial levels to be in a position to attract and retain talent. And Madam Speaker, we could not do that without moving in a lockstep approach. On the top of it, the government was one of the biggest employers of minimum wage earners. Madam Speaker, under this government, we have made significant strides to change that. Achieving this, Madam Speaker, required significant adjustments to the salaries of drivers and office attendants, Madam Speaker, and others at the bottom of the scale. Madam Speaker, that is implemented, and it is an achievement of which we are extremely proud. So, Madam Speaker, as we map from 325 separate salary scales to 16, the compensation restructuring by design resulted in differential upward adjustments across the public sector. And this was and is at the root of much of the unease and tension that's been observed. When everyone received an increase of 5%, there are no comparisons across groups and individuals to be made. However, in a compensation restructuring, with differentiated outcomes, comparisons are inevitable. And let me just point out what's the obvious, Madam Speaker, is that a compensation restructuring of this kind has never before been done in Jamaica. So instead of the employee looking at what he or she has received in the context of what he has received or she has received in the past, persons begin to compare with their perception or what they've heard of the circumstances of others without full information. Madam Speaker, in previous settlements over the past decade between 2012-2013 and 21-22, public sector salaries have been adjusted by 28% if you add it up on gross salaries. If you compound it, you get 31.6%. Madam Speaker, in this new compensation restructuring, the overwhelming majority of public officers have received or will be receiving adjustments in compensation over the implementation period which exceed what they would have received across the last 10 years combined. And many in the first year will receive increases that are higher than the last 10 years combined. Let me be more definitive, Madam Speaker. Wages and salaries will increase by more in this public sector restructuring than it has increased in dollar terms over the previous decade. And I have the figures for you to see. Okay, Madam Speaker, the increase in this year alone is $102.7 billion. Last year, for the entire public service, it was 18.7 billion. The year before, 11 billion. The year before, 11 billion. You get the point. Okay? Now, there are some complications about where allowances are and so on, but the point is there. Now, when you add up everything over those 10 years, Madam Speaker, you get 102.2 billion over those 10 years. And this year, you have 102.8. This is a quick analysis, Madam Speaker, but the point is unmistakably clear of the effort the government is making, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, this just represents the first year of the public sector restructuring. But somehow, Madam Speaker, this perspective has been lost as individuals compare with other individuals, which I guess is human nature, and groups compare with groups. But if we are self-conscious about human nature, we can observe, Madam Speaker, and you know, recognize it as human to compare, but not get lost in it, Madam Speaker. Not get lost in it. Because 102 billion in 1 year, Madam Speaker,
In recent years, we've heard people actively talking about passive income, investing, and another popular one, real estate. Though all of these could play a major role in securing generational wealth, there are some key steps that should be taken to lead to a great outcome. Correct documentation to prove ownership of land is a necessity. We'll run you through the process in this next feature.
If you are a landowner who does not have a registered title, you can apply for one now. A registered title is a document that indicates you own the land, and if you don't have one, another person can lay claim to your land. The process of registering for land titles begins here. Here are the initial steps you need to take. Step 1. Obtain and sign an application form as stipulated by the Registration of Titles Act. Step 2 is to obtain a statutory declaration, which is merely a letter from a local resident attesting to the applicant's ownership of the land. Step 3 is similar to Step 2 in that you must obtain a supporting statutory statement from two people who have known the property for at least 30 years in order to demonstrate ownership rights through possession. This is necessary if the petitioner lacks 40 years' worth of documentary evidence of ownership. The fourth step requires you to obtain a current certificate of payment for property taxes. You will also need a survey-checked diagram if the land is being registered by plan. After that, present any other document you may have proving ownership, such as a receipt, transfer, or probate form. Finally, you must pay an entry fee, which is equal to 1% of the property's value. You must pay this cost when you provide your paperwork to the assessor at the title office. You will receive an official receipt with the name of the applicant, the document number, and the receipt number printed on it. Your application number is printed on the receipt and must be used when you are contacted about the application. Once your application has been submitted successfully, you must save your receipt. Processing takes anywhere from 6 months to a year. If a rejection notification is sent out during that time, the processing period will restart if you want to reapply. Pay your property taxes, have your land surveyed, and remember, land titles can be used as a resource to safeguard your future and the future of your children. To learn more about how to obtain a land title today, visit the National Land Agency's website at www.nla.gov.jm.
We drink water every day, or I would suppose you do. Did you know that before that bottled water hits the shelves in our supermarkets and your community pipes, it goes through a rigorous process of filtration? Let's find out how.
The human body cannot function without water. While you may live for up to 3 weeks without food, you cannot go more than a week without water. From breaking down the food we eat so the body can use it, to helping us heal when we get sick, water is needed for almost every process that takes place in the body. And although 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, drinking it directly from seas, rivers, wells, or aqueducts may make you sick. Untreated water contains bacteria and other germs, as well as chemicals that may be dangerous to the body. So in order to get the water from here to here safely, it has to be treated. Water treatment processes differ depending on the source. If the water is coming from a river, for example here at the Negro River in St. Thomas, it usually goes through an extensive treatment process before reaching the pipe.
Here is where we do the first type of treatment in the form of sedimentation and screening. Behind me you can see where we screen the bigger stuff like the sticks, the stones and debris. Then we come down to the sediment where we separate the sand from the stones. And then this water will leave from St. Thomas and pipe into Kingston via pipeline into the Mona Reservoir.
The Mona Reservoir is the island's largest raw water storage facility and provides the liquid to over 30% of people living in Kingston and St. Andrew. If this is where you get your water, here is where the next step in the treatment process occurs.
Here in the reservoir, we allow for maximum levels of mixing, maximum levels of aeration, as can be done here at the facility. We also, at the reservoir, you allow for settling out of the silt and the suspended particles, dirt particles, that would otherwise be in the raw water. We then take the water from the reservoir and take it to the Mona treatment plant.
At the treatment plant, chemicals are added to further purify the water. Chlorine is first added to kill bacteria.
You have stages that include flocculation, where we actually add chemicals to the water that allow those microscopic dirt particles that are still in the water to be brought together in what we call flocks, and then we are able to skim it off and remove it from the water.
The water is then passed through filters which contain layers of sand, gravel, charcoal or synthetic materials that remove remaining small particles. The final stage is disinfection. Here, chlorine is added to kill any other bacteria or germ.
Ensuring that we have what we refer to as chlorine residual that goes with the water, so that as the water travels along the pipeline to our customers, should it come in contact with any germs along the way, there is enough chlorine residual in that water to destroy those germs and still be delivered to the customer in good quality.
The water is tested all throughout the treatment process to ensure that what you get in your pipe meets World Health Organization standards.
For several years running, the National Water Commission has won the best tasting water in the Caribbean. We have also been acknowledged by the various arms of the United Nations at different points in time as having one of the best quality water in the hemisphere.
That is definitely something we can drink to.
The strength of a woman. Shaggy did remind us about how wonderful women are. Women have been breaking barriers and surpassing expectations for quite some time now. In this next feature, we'll hear their stories.
History and perhaps culture have kept many women a rung lower on the professional ladder and firmly planted in fields once deemed a man's domain. But more women are going beyond the expected and dismantling these stereotypical norms. One of the biggest areas in which they're going beyond the unseen rules guiding gender and professional expectations is hydrology.
Hi, I'm Alexia Gray and I'm a woman in hydrology.
Hi, my name is Natalie Hutchings and I'm a hydrogeologist at the Water Resources Authority. And yes, I'm a woman.
I ended up being a hydrologist completely by accident, by serendipity. I wanted to do engineering when I finished high school, but I didn't get into the program when I first applied. So I enrolled in geology and physics classes in my first year at university, and the rest is history.
As a hydrogeologist, some of my routine work includes wells and stream flow monitoring and measurements. I also do water quality sampling, and I create maps and do reports. So essentially my work takes me traveling around Jamaica in search for water sources. Hydrogeology was something I've always wanted to do. So from high school, I wanted to be a geologist. So I went to UWI to do geology. And then that led me into a career at the WRA, where now I work in water. And I've come to appreciate water as the most invaluable natural resource on Earth.
Despite ideas of progress not always matching parity, or the whole narrative of what's a man's or a woman's job, what these women are doing is significantly impacting lives right across the country.
The Water Resources Authority has 3 main roles. We investigate queries about new and existing water sources or resources. We collect data in terms of stream flow and quality, and we also allocate water to users such as the NWC, which is our biggest user, and other entities.
In order to allocate water, we would have to have an understanding of how much water is available. So we would do data collection such as flow measurements or well measurements and understand how much water is available to see how much water is in demand, and then we do the calculations. So where there is a deficit, water is usually supplied from areas where there's a surplus to balance things out.
For these women, their duties also expand to providing responses in times of drought.
The key to drought resiliency is improved capture and storage of water. Jamaica has more than enough water to serve its population. However, our problem is that we do not capture enough of it, and we do not have enough storage for the population. So the key is to capture it, reduce leaks, and to build more storage, install tanks, build more dams, and other types of reservoirs.
They're also testing and assessing the quality of our groundwater while keeping us all in the know.
Jamaica's groundwater quality is generally good. It meets the ambient standard, the national ambient standard. Ambient meaning doesn't need any treatment, right? However, there are a few basins that are contaminated due to pollution or saltwater intrusion. But for the most part across the island, our groundwater is pretty good for domestic use. However, for agricultural and industrial users, they may need to treat their water to international standards depending on what they're going to use it for.
And as for their perception on why the profession of hydrology or hydrogeology remains a male-dominated field?
For a hydrologist or hydrogeologist, being out in the field means doing physical and practical tasks. It usually includes long drives out of town, hiking through river valleys, over hills in search for water. The profession is usually male-dominated because we live in a society and a culture where men are usually seen as physically stronger, and they also require less security in the field.
Women were not allowed to work, we were not even allowed to become educated to do these jobs. So that has been changing with changing attitudes of both men and women. It's improving, but we have a far way to go.
And just like these 2 female hydrologists, many women are stepping into diverse professions and are changing the older narrative to craft their own stories.
It was a pleasure having you tuned in to today's show. Don't forget to visit our website, jis.gov.jm, to catch up on this episode and so much more. I'm Adrian Atkinson. Thank you so much for watching.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.